Welcome to Championship Drive. Who's in? Presented by Goodyear.
Hey, look who's back for another year. It's Championship Drive. Who's in? Kevin Connors here in our Bristol, Connecticut studios. Delighted to be with you. We're going to be here every Sunday for a robust roundtable discussion where our job is to let you know who we think is in the college football playoff conversation. And to do that, we've got the best panel of experts in all of college football. Heather Dinich, Rod Gilmore, and the coach, Jim Mora. Coach, get us started with your thoughts today.
Well, Kevin, while the SEC top to bottom is still the top conference in college football, watch out for the ACC because here comes Clemson, here comes UNC, here comes Notre Dame, maybe even Miami challenging the Alabamas and the Georgias and the Floridas and the Texas A&Ms for football supremacy. Rod?
Hey, Jim, you know, the SEC is now the Big 12. You know, the conference where defense is optional. The SEC has now decided to also opt out of playing defense. 9 teams scored more than 35 points this past weekend, and the 3 teams that really used their calling card as defense, LSU, Alabama, and Florida, turned in that card by giving up more than 40 points. We can say, Heather, welcome to the Big 12 to all the SEC fans.
Well, Rod, defense still wins championships. I believe that. And on a day when the SEC had the dubious distinction of playing the worst defense among the Power 5 conferences, Georgia and Clemson separated themselves among those CFP contenders. Georgia is allowing 12.3 points per game. Clemson, 13.2. They're the teams to beat right now.
All great thoughts. Here's mine. Get used to hearing about BYU because the Cougars aren't going anywhere. They're 4-0. They're outscoring their opponents by 131 points per game. They've got an NFL prospect at quarterback in Zach Wilson, and though they're still scheduling teams, the road ahead is very doable. If they run the table in a strange year, you may hear about BYU in the CFP. Who's in, who could be in, who hurt their chances yesterday, all coming up on Championship Drive. Who's in?
45-41, the defending national champs are in trouble. Looking in that direction, throws right, and it's knocked away. Incomplete. Amazing. Looking deep, got a receiver. It's caught. Chapman, touchdown. Jimbo Fisher has done it. Hands Florida its first loss of the season. 15, 10, Sam to the 5, touchdown. Super Sam Ellinger. A Red River showdown for the ages. Kick is away, and it's no good. He missed it. Lob toward the end zone. It's intercepted. Trey Brown. You can unhitch the wagon. Gonna air it out near side. Caught. Touchdown. Tennessee. This one he throws off his back foot, and there's the interception right on cue. Look out from behind. Down he goes. The ball is out. He's gonna score. Touchdown, Georgia. This is the number 2 team in the country, the big boy on the block in the SEC, and you have played them off their feet in the first half. So this is highest combined yardage in the history of the SEC. Najee Harris going to the end zone for the 5th time tonight. He'll enjoy this one. It's a very satisfying win.
Perhaps you've heard things are a little bit different this year, so I think a great place for us to start is with our college football playoff expert, Heather Dinich. Heather, give us an idea what we need to know about the college football playoff this year as opposed to years past.
Kevin, a couple of quick main points for you on that. November 24th is going to be the first selection committee ranking release, and that's important because it allows some time for the committee members to see what the Pac-12 and Big Ten look like after joining late. But there are only 5 total rankings this year, and the final one will be on December 20th. That's the fewest rankings ever. Plus, there are 3 new committee members, but the one you will see is Committee Chair Gary Barta, the new face of the group, Iowa's athletic director. I think those are the big things to watch this year, but no changes to the protocol. Everything's different in college football, from start times to the number of games played, but the still will determine the top 4 teams the same way.
All right, circle the date on the calendar, Tuesday, November 24th. Of course, week 6 of the college football season, some major storylines. Florida blew an 11-point lead in College Station. And despite another great day for Kyle Trask and Kyle Pitts, Kellen Mond and the Aggies were the ones celebrating on Kyle Field thanks to a late field goal, 41-38. Number 4 Florida goes down. Clemson pulled a Clemson yesterday, won for the 25th straight time at home, 25th straight ACC win with a dominant performance against number 7 Miami. Trevor Lawrence, Heisman worthy again. The Tigers actually played defense and came away with a 42-17 win. The same cannot be said for what happened at Oxford last night, right? Over 1,300 total yards of offense in Alabama's 63-48 win over Ole Miss. Mac Jones threw for over 400 yards. Najee Harris ran for over 200. That never happens, right? It was the most combined yards in a football game in SEC history. We're talking historic day yesterday. And I love this. Great job by Travis. The defense rests because it did all day on Saturday. Look at the yardage allowed in these games in a power conference like the SEC. In power conferences, no less. So, Rod, I guess the question is, in this era of incredible offenses, is it possible to make the college football playoff without so much as an adequate defense?
Well, Kevin, there are 2 points for me. First, the pandemic. The pandemic has been a bigger issue for defense than offense. You can afford a couple of mistakes on the offensive side, but you can't on defense. And so having people in and out of practice with the quarantine issues and the like becomes a problem. Lack of depth is an issue when you're facing a tempo offense. You just don't get the rest and you don't have what you need to keep going. And I think the other point is we have to change our view of what is good defense now. The way these offenses are going, it's impossible to expect not to give up yards. I think what's critical now is that you have to be opportunistic, you have to be able to get those takeaways, and you have to be able to get key stops in a game. But trying to think that you're going to hold people down to 20 points or less, Jim, those days are long gone.
I completely agree with you, Rod. Those days are gone. Remember the old days, Rod, when you'd be drawing up a defense, you'd start with a tight end, 2 backs, and 2 receivers, and that was your starting point. Well, you never see that formation anymore because teams are so exotic on offense. But still, I will tell you this. Defense wins games. In order to win championships, you have to play great defense. You look at LSU, Clemson, and Bama, the teams that are winning national championships. And yes, they're explosive on offense, but they are able to make those plays when they need to. Rod, as you said, they're opportunistic. This year you see Clemson and Georgia as the only 2 teams that I can point to and go, wow, you know, those are really good defensive football teams. But, you know, it is a different barometer right now, as you said, Rod, for what good defense is.
Heather,
I disagree with that, guys, but to answer Kevin's point directly, you can get into the college football playoff by playing bad defense. Oklahoma is living proof of that. If your offense is lights out like it was and the defense was terrible, they forgave that year because the offense was historically good. But I will point out, winning the college football playoff is an entirely different situation. Look at 2017 Bama. Their defense held opponents to 11.9 points per game, the best in the country. 2018 Clemson held opponents to 13.1 points per game, the best in the country. So at some point, if you are going to win it all, you have to stop somebody.
I think that's a great point.
Heather, I'm glad you said that. Yeah. I'm glad you said there's a difference between getting there and winning it, because you know what? Getting there shouldn't be enough. Winning it is the goal. Not just, if your goal is just to get to the college football playoff, then you're probably not going to win it. The goal has got to be to win it. So I'm glad that you made that point, because Oklahoma, the reason that they have not been a consistently good football team is because they play poor defense. They don't tackle. They don't exhibit toughness. They don't exhibit effort. I don't feel bad saying these things. It's on display every Saturday. They don't play good defense. LSU yesterday was an aberration. They were awful on defense.
Jim, but I don't think you need great defense to win a championship. You just can't be awful. I mean, if Oklahoma had been adequate defensively, they would have had a shot. But the other thing is, you can no longer get by with a pedestrian offense. You can't just rely on your defense to win a championship. You have to be able to keep pace with these offenses that put up a lot of points. So I think you have to at least have an average to above average defense to get by, and you better be similar on offense, or else you cannot get into a shooting contest with a team that can score, because you won't survive it.
That's a great statement by Rod there, and that is very 2020. You don't have to have a great defense. You just don't have to be awful. That's where we are right now in 2020 in college football. All right, it's time now for the AT&T 5G Top Performer. Of course, it's an offensive player. North Carolina's Michael Carter and the Heels ran wild Saturday. Carter ran it 17 times for 214 yards and 2 touchdowns. How about UNC amassing 399 total yards of rushing offense yesterday in a big victory over Virginia Tech? Lots more to come on Championship Drive. Who's in? When we come back, we'll run through the top plays of the day from Week 6 of the college football season. We'll get our panel's thoughts on where the Notre Dame Fighting Irish fit in the conversation. Plus, who are the top 6 teams, and what about the teams who haven't yet played? All coming up on Championship Drive. Who's in?
Championship Drive. Who's in? Is presented by Goodyear, helping you discover the road ahead. Goodyear, more driven. Chip Drive. Who's in? Presented by Goodyear.
Are back, and without further ado, let's get to everyone's top 6, with a caveat being we're only including the teams who have played games up to this point. So, unlike the AP poll, we're not including the Big Ten or the Pac-12 as of yet. We'll get to that coming up in just a bit. Coach, get us started.
Well, I'm going to start with Clemson, number 1. I think they're the most complete team in college football. Besides Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne, they've got a stellar defense, followed by Alabama. I think yesterday was an aberration on defense. Georgia, Notre Dame, North Carolina, and one I know that Rod's not going to like, Oklahoma State at number 6.
Oh, why are you cheating off my notes? I mean, come on, get your own top 6. Those are mine. But, you know, the thing is, all these teams are flawed if you're not named Clemson. The only team that gets me somewhat excited and intrigued is Georgia, because Stetson Bennett seems to have solved their quarterback problem, Heather. So they may wind up being a team that also isn't flawed.
Well, you're right, but I disagree with the number 2 and number 3. Guys, I'm sorry. Look, I don't know who's going to win the game between Alabama and Georgia as we sit right here, but I can't put a team that just gave up over 600 yards at number 2. I just can't. So I have Clemson and then Georgia and then Alabama and everybody else.
Oak State, I wonder if we all believe they're the 6th best team, or that there just aren't 6 teams good enough yet to make up our top 6. But Heather, I want to drill down on Notre Dame. Everyone's had Notre Dame. Let me play devil's advocate here. They didn't exactly blow away a 1-win Duke team, and they didn't exactly blow away a 1-3 Florida State team. So make the case for why Notre Dame belongs.
Well, I think everybody has to remember that they've been off for 2 weeks, in part because of a bye week and in part because of coronavirus disruption, right? So it's what I expected against Florida State in terms of a sloppy, slow start, but eventually to pull away. I think Ian Book is a great quarterback. This team needs some consistency to get on the field, and they have some time still to wow the selection committee. And remember, if Clemson and Notre Dame split, the selection committee could choose both of those teams, but clearly Notre Dame does have to play better down the stretch in order to have that a realistic possibility.
It's hard for me to hear
I
you say
think when it's
Ian
Notre
Book's
Dame,
a great quarterback. He's a good quarterback. He's an adequate quarterback. What I think makes Notre Dame special is their offensive line, the 5 returners that just munch people up front in that run game. And then once again, let's come back to defense. They're playing solid defense.
how do you not like Ian Book?
I like him.
Coach. Ian Book is
I like
great.
him, but he's not a great. Hey, listen, the word great should be reserved for a special few. Guys like Trevor Lawrence, for instance, he's great. Ian Book is a really good player, but let's not use the word great.
He's really a critical component of Notre Dame, and why I have a lot of confidence in Notre Dame. If they didn't have him at quarterback, Notre Dame would not be on my list at all. I mean, he makes a huge difference for them. I agree with you about the offensive line, but I think a lot of Notre Dame, I think we're projecting down the line because we haven't seen a lot of them. I know I'm projecting that I expect them to be better than they have been and get all their players back and have a nice routine. But, man, come on. I'm more of an Ian Book fan than you are, obviously.
No, I like Ian. Listen, I like Ian Book. I just don't think he's great, okay? He's darn good. You're right, they wouldn't win without him, and Clemson would probably struggle a little bit without Trevor Lawrence.
Right, darn good and great. Heather, how about this? Through 3 games of the season, there are only 2 remaining unbeaten teams in the SEC. Are we going to look back on that at the end of the season and say, you know what, that's a credit to the league because it's so deep, or the SEC is just not as good this year?
Well, I think that's yet to be determined. I mean, when you see what Florida's defense did, what Texas A&M did, what does that mean? How do you put that into perspective after 6 weeks? I think it's extremely difficult because Texas A&M got a big win. They deserve a lot of credit. But, man, that was an absolute meltdown by a Florida team that has finally shown it's working on all cylinders offensively, right? So when you going into this weekend, it was like, is it Florida or is it Georgia? And now it's just Georgia. And then when you see Tennessee, how good are they really? Well, you know, I think that question is yet to be answered. Is the SEC deep or is it average?
Heather, I'm not convinced that we are going to have an undefeated team out of the SEC. And part of that is, you know, the expansion to 10 conference games. That makes it a heck of a lot tougher. These teams know each other. And I just think that there's going to be a fight every week, and we have a chance to see, you know, Georgia get knocked off or Alabama gets knocked off. So I'm not sold that we'll have an undefeated team out of the SEC, but I think regardless, if we have a 1-loss team or 2 1-loss teams, the SEC will be in the hunt for the discussion as to whether they deserve more than one team.
Well, I agree with.
But
with
isn't that so much fun? Isn't that so much fun, guys? I tweeted at Greg Sankey and I said, you know what? I said, keep these 10 games. Keep them. Go ahead and keep them because it makes it so much more fun. And imagine if we had 10 SEC games, the SEC rivalry games, and then go ahead, throw your cupcake in. Fans will love it. It's a win for everybody.
You see, I think, Heather, the SEC top to bottom is better than they've been in a long time because of teams like Tennessee. I think Arkansas is much improved. We see Ole Miss and what they can do on offense. They've got to figure out their defense. Alabama, Georgia, A&M, Florida, those are still good teams. I think Alabama's an exceptional team with, you know, hey, they struggled yesterday on defense, but they'll get that fixed. But top to bottom, I just see big improvement in the SEC.
I know this. I know that a couple of teams like Arkansas, Missouri, the returns are early, but I think they nailed their head coaching decisions. You're right, guys. This could be a very deep conference throughout the rest of the season, obviously.
Oh, my gosh. My kids love that. That's a true story. We watched the whole thing. They were yelling about it.
I guess
you had the best view.
If we've had flies on heads this week, moths on cameras would fit in there as well. Of course, a great game in College Station yesterday. We take a look now at the All-State Playoff Predictor. Clemson with the best chance of reaching the playoff. According to the computer, it's 75%. Ohio State is next best. They haven't even played a game. And by the way, since Notre Dame is part of the ACC, of the non-Power 5 teams, BYU with the highest percentage at 5.2%. Heather, let's talk about that. We haven't mentioned the Big Ten or the Pac-12 yet. They haven't played yet, but of course they will in a matter of weeks. Who will we be talking about in 2 weeks once they take the field?
Well, we'll be talking about Ohio State because they have one of the most talented teams in the country on paper. My question for both of those conferences, Kevin, is how quickly can they start fast? Because everybody knows how rusty teams have been. Ohio State hasn't played since December of 2019. Oregon hasn't played since January. And by the time the first rankings come out, Clemson and Alabama will have played 8 or 9 games. Ohio State and Oregon, I don't know, 3, 4 maybe? So how quickly can they shake off the rust and get into this conversation?
Heather, I've got Ohio State in my top 3 the moment they step on the field. This should be one of the best Ohio State teams we've seen in the last couple of years. And then I'm also getting Penn State and Oregon in the top 10. I think that the moment those teams play, they are worthy of that. They're not in there right now, Coach, simply because they have not been on the field yet. But those are 3 talented teams that should be in the discussion.
I agree with you, Rod, and I think another team that we should keep our eye on is USC. I think, you know, being down here in L.A., I think the swagger's back a little bit. They've got a quarterback in Keaton Slovis that they like. There's a good feel again about USC, and I'm anxious to see if they come out and play the way I think they're capable of playing.
All right, so Ohio State, Penn State, USC, Oregon, some teams to keep an eye on when the Big Ten and the Pac-12 get going. And of course, you can get involved in the conversation. Log on to twitter.com/SportsCenter. Make your voice heard in this week's Capital One fan vote on Monday. Our thanks to our panel this week, Heather Dinich, Coach Jim Mora, and Rod Gilmore for being with us. Week 6 in the books. We are on to week 7 of the college football season. We're back here again next Sunday. For all of us, I'm Kevin Connors. Thanks so much for watching Championship Drive. Who's in?